We're used to seeing exhilarating action in the UFC. From extraordinary flying knees to spinning elbows to bloodied faces, the UFC is all about entertainment. But behind the scenes, a lot goes into making the promotion entertaining and profitable. And for that to happen, UFC President Dana White needs to think like a businessman. Considering the kind of business Jake Paul has been generating, Dana White might just consider his absurd offer of fighting McGregor. First, the dirty history. Jake Paul and Dana White have been at it for some time now, and while it's been really entertaining, a lot of people are starting to side with the YouTuber turned boxer Jake Paul. It all started when Jake Paul offered to quit boxing and join the UFC on one condition. What might that condition be? Well, Jake told Dana that if he took better care of his fighters, he'd join the promotion and help him make some big bucks. However, Dana wasn't too excited about letting Jake join the promotion, and instead, he called the YouTuber out for taking steroids. 0 to 100 really quick, Dana. But Jake, being Jake, accused Dana of taking cocaine. Jake even released a track dissing the UFC president and calling him out for exploiting his fighters. It's sort of like a love-hate relationship if you ask us. Dana is a businessman. He knows Jake Paul can bring a lot of business, but he's been somewhat hesitant to move ahead with the opportunity, mainly because he's said so much garbage about the YouTuber that accepting his offer now would make him look really weak. But ever since Jake offered to fight McGregor in his return to the Octagon, Dana can't help but imagine all the green coming in from the pay-per-view revenue. Next, a win-win. Before this deal, Dana has never really paid too much attention to whatever Jake had to say. And why would he? Jake hasn't squared up against a real fighter to date. Tyrone Woodley and Ben Askren are real fighters, but they're not boxers. Heck, Nate Robinson is a basketball player. These aren't real opponents, Jake. But this time around, Jake has him thinking about that big payday. He's going to be pocketing a lot of cash if he lets the two fighters meet in the Octagon. When you think about it, it's almost impossible for Jake to win against McGregor in the Octagon. If it were a boxing match, we would have considered the odds a bit more, but not in the Octagon. No way. But we don't think Jake wants to win this fight, though. He has other things in mind. A hidden agenda, maybe? Who knows? Because it's not the odds that make this fight exciting. It's the deal Jake has put forward. And to be honest, it's got Dana thinking. Even hardcore UFC fans that pretty much hate Jake couldn't help but call it a fair deal. What does the deal look like? So, if Jake wins the fight, Dana will have to agree to his terms about raising fighter pay and offering healthcare to UFC fighters. And if he loses, he'll donate all of his purse to UFC fighters who make less than $50,000 a fight. Not a bad deal. It's a win-win situation for Jake if you think about it. Win or lose, he'll have all the UFC fighters on his back, and he'll even end up getting a lot of respect from underpaid fighters. Gotta do it. Dana White didn't dismiss the fight completely, but he did call it highly unlikely in an interview with Jake's brother Logan Paul. But UFC heavyweight fighter Brendan Schaub believes a fight between Jake Paul and promotion's kingpin Conor McGregor would make Dana a lot of money. He's got to do it, said Schaub. Brendan Schaub thinks Dana White should go ahead with the deal because the odds are clearly in his favor. Think of it from McGregor's perspective. He hasn't won a single fight since 2016. It's sort of tainting his legacy when you think about it. You have a fighter who was practically the face of the promotion for a good 2 or 3 years. He took the UFC to the next level, but he couldn't win a single fight for the last 6 years of his career. Doesn't sound too good, right? So, if the two do end up facing each other, McGregor will not lose. He'll give it his all, but he won't lose. That's for sure, because losing to Jake Paul would be the final nail in the coffin. Legacy ruined forever. At the end of the day, Dana White is a businessman. Brendan Schaub also had something similar to say. He said, Dana thinks like a businessman. He'll consider it for sure. He didn't dismiss it in the interview, so he's definitely thinking about it. Next, Jake's take. Jake thinks he can beat McGregor with just 6 months of training inside the cage. We're not sure if 6 months would be enough, Jake. But sure, a lot of people would pay a handsome amount just to see you get knocked out. But Jake is very smart. He was heard telling ESPN that there are no losers in this proposal. If Jake ends up winning, it'll still be Dana White who changes the future of the UFC forever by giving fighters a higher wage and medical expenses. And if Jake loses, UFC fighters will still get a higher wage and medical allowances. So he's spot on with that point. But if we're being real, Jake's hidden agenda is, and always will be, about making a good business deal with the UFC. He's been trying to get a UFC fight ever since he turned professional in 2020. Initially, he was going after a McGregor fight, but he has expressed that facing Masvidal is also an option. Now the Twitter feud. Even though McGregor hasn't expressed too much of an interest in the fight, the two regularly exchange blows on Twitter. Just recently, McGregor posted some footage of him training, on which Jake commented, "Embarrassing." But we all know Conor for his comeback contracts, and he shut Jake up by labeling him as a jackass. Now, in other UFC news, Paddy's game plan. Paddy Pimblett is slowly starting to gain a lot of popularity in the UFC world for his business approach to fighting, a little similar to Conor McGregor's. The 27-year-old was a fan favorite in his last fight in the O2 Arena, winning convincingly against Rodrigo Vargas via submission with a rear naked choke. Paddy did absorb an extremely devastating strike early on in the match, but recovered soon after. The fight was pretty straightforward if you ask us, but the real drama actually started after the fight. When Paddy was asked who he'll be facing next, he answered that he won't be fighting anyone from the top 15. Add a few more zeros to my contract, and then I'll think about fighting someone from the top 15. Despite only 2 appearances in the Octagon, Paddy thinks he's already proved his worth. We're not sure about that just yet. We actually think Paddy should have fought someone from the top 15 before indirectly asking for a new contract. It might have made his case a bit stronger, but nevertheless, Paddy is a really exciting fighter, and we can't wait to see more of him in the future. Next, McGregor demands respect. Conor McGregor has finally spoken about all the comments he's been getting from the MMA world, and to be fair, it isn't cool. See, whether you hate him or love him, you can't deny that he changed the UFC. He got so many new eyes addicted to the UFC. In short, he's brought in a lot of business. It isn't like Conor will get whatever he wants. After all, it is a two-way street. Conor needs to prove his worth before he can get a title fight, but he's been demanding one after hinting at his return to the UFC later this year. He wants to take on Kamaru Usman for the welterweight title bout, but a lot of fighters have strong opinions about that matchup, claiming he's done nothing to earn that fight. During an interview, Kamaru Usman was asked whether he'd ever fight Khabib and Conor. Kamaru was pretty clear with his answer, claiming he'd never fight Khabib because he's like a brother to him. But Conor, it sounded like he'd love to get his hands on Conor. He also added that Conor is all bark and no bite. It's kind of funny because we've seen Kamaru copy things McGregor has said word to word, and maybe the reason Kamaru said all that is because he wants a money fight. Because let's face it, Kamaru would probably knock McGregor out, but he wouldn't come close to Khabib. But Conor has demanded respect from his fellow fighters, claiming he's going to get the respect he deserves. People are going to give me my respect for my fighting style and everything else. Conor also thinks he's going to waltz back into the title shot in no time. Let's see, McGregor. You're used to getting what you want. Let's see what Dana does this time around. That's it from our side, folks. So what do you think? Will we ever see Jake Paul and McGregor battle it out in the Octagon? Or will McGregor have to work his way up to a good fight, like every other fighter? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more exciting videos. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.